Mike is from VivaKi. You're new to VivaKi somewhat?
6 months.
6 months,
Yeah.
Okay. So you oversee AOD and a few other things. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so oversee AOD, the platform, so related technologies like DSPs, the media footprint, and third-party data relationships, primarily targeting, although increasingly effectiveness and other types of measurement.
Okay, so if we could dovetail off the last conversation, because I think this is really interesting. So Carrie brought up the point, which I was thinking, Carrie used a point of view, and I was thinking sort of tune in, right, versus consumption, just those as separate. And then your platform is called Audience on Demand, right? Yeah. So the whole prevalence of on demand, meaning an advertiser being able to acquire an audience or a consumer being able to get content, and feed their insatiable appetite. How does that affect value? Because TV is all about tune in at a point in time that is scheduled, right? How do you reconcile all that?
So I think it's interesting that, through the course of the morning, you've heard a lot of people, I guess, infer that inventory in the addressable space is of lower quality, right, or potentially lower CPM. So there are sales channel conflict concerns among the publishing community. What I would say is, there's definitely a reason we're not called crappy inventory on demand. That probably wouldn't go over so well. And CIID. Yeah, exactly. And so the game is definitely not about finding the lower cost impressions out there in the ecosystem and then bringing those back to our advertisers and trying to win the last view cookie-based attribution game. It really is about finding the audiences that people care about and removing waste from the ecosystem. So to your point, just like people try and find content on demand that they care about, we're trying to create that same type of relevance on the advertising side of the equation. So
can we talk about something, and I'm just giving this a label, so
please do.
Throw it out, but I go back to the conversation with Kurt, like a data profile, right? Mm-hmm. To me, a data profile would be for a specific advertiser, a specific product, a specific campaign, the aggregation of third-party and first-party data sets they need to deliver media.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that seems like a hell of a problem.
Yeah, it's actually, so we're partnering to attack that problem. So we launched something with VivaKi called Audience Insights, and basically what it does, it takes all of your direct serve inventory as well as all your addressable inventory and creates kind of a DNA profile of which audience segments you index highly against and which you index not so highly against. So imagine looking at your exposure, who am I reaching across these different channels, who's then clicking or interacting, and then who's actually converting, and sometimes you'll see different segments kind of surface, both first and third party within that funnel. So that is a data profile.
So and the variable of what the desired outcome of the campaign is as a business metric comes into that, I'm assuming, as well.
Absolutely.
So the analogy that I made, I didn't articulate very well earlier about comparing the RIAA in '99 to right now. My point in that was that when you embrace technology, i.e. Apple, right? If you embrace technology and you get ahead of the curve, there is an opportunity for premiums there and to actually, right?
There's no question
So
about
I think to your point about the inferences, if you actually take an audience and you dissect it and you hone in on those that are more valuable, you garner premiums.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to the percentage of premiums that you're seeing now and the value of inventory?
It's a good question, and by the way, I think it's one that translates across both my world and Tracy's world. So if you ask Tracy, how does addressable affect CPMs for that spot inventory? It's not lower, right? People are willing to pay a premium for that same inventory. So that's one thing I would call out. And then the other thing I would call out is, for publishers who are reluctant to push inventory into the system, I mean, I've got all kinds of use cases or case studies around where publishers have actually received higher CPMs by going through our addressable channel than they would have selling the inventory direct. So I don't know if I can get into percentages in terms of cost, if that's what you're asking.
I'm not asking you to divulge anything confidential. I'm really just asking you to give me a benchmark. Like on straight display, you're seeing a 20% premium, a 30% premium. How much more valuable is it to an advertiser? Because we have publishers in the room as well as advertisers. How much more valuable is it to eliminate waste?
Well, I mean, if you look at, so I guess you can look at it a few different ways. You can look at it CPM or look at TRPs, which I can touch upon our philosophy in a sec. You can look at cost per point, which gives you something completely different, and then you can look at cost per impact, which is something entirely different altogether. And most of the entrants or early entrants into the addressable space were of the direct response variety, right? So at the end of the day, they're looking for a cost per acquisition, a cost per lead, a cost per fan if you're talking about social. And so I think that they see the economics really paying off in terms of the value they're getting.
So forgive me, because maybe the distinction is most of what AOD is delivering and executing now as far as campaigns go, it's performance-based?
The vast majority.
Oh, okay, interesting. So if we, and this would, obviously, because you're buying mostly on performance, but to take a step back, sort of on the idea of pure addressability, that it's the targeting. What's interesting in TV, there's a really great study by, there's a study that's been going on, Beyond the 30 Seconds it's called, and it's been Kraft, Disney, they just presented at the TV of Tomorrow conference. And the point that the PhD leading it made was that addressable television is not valuable because you're targeting. It's more valuable because you're eliminating waste, right? Which can sound like splitting hairs. Yeah. Tell me about your thoughts on digital and how that would prevail.
That's a good question. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're starting with a client telling us who their target is. So your campaign is only going to be as good as their original definition, right? But then going out there and actually dramatically limiting or reducing waste is always going to pay off in the back end in terms of either some kind of economic impact or some kind of brand equity impact that folks like Vizu and Comscore would actually go out and measure.
So I know that you're... Let's talk a little about the trading desk side of the business and that connective tissue, what you're seeing. Could you just talk at sort of a macro level as to what you're seeing as far as the appetite of brands for you at the holding company level, how you're serving that? And then how does that, I would love also just to understand, what does that mean operationally from a day-to-day for, the relationship between the advertiser, how the advertiser assesses success and performance in media?
So let's break it down into a few different pieces. So the first question is around how we're approaching kind of the whole addressable space.
That connective tissue of addressability and then
so the lens we use is that there are experiential advertising buys and there are addressable buys. And addressable, by the way, does not necessarily equate to trading desk in our world, and there's that might be semantics, but I think there's a difference I can touch upon. So experiential is sort of the high impact stuff that the previous panel talked a lot about, whether that's a television program or some of the stuff on AOL, the tentpole type programs. AOD serves as an extension of the agency team to service the addressable base buying, audience-based buying. It's not a trading desk in the sense that we don't actually take ownership of inventory like some of the other folks, package it up, and then kind of resell it or bundle it into our advertisers. So it's 100% about here's my money, I want to buy this particular audience. So we are not a vendor or a publisher. We are an extension of the agency team. And in that regard, we're not necessarily client-facing, so we directly support the Starcoms and Digitas's and Razorfishes.
But Publicis has an in-house trading desk, right?
Audience on Demand is the programmable audience buying practice.
So you guys are so you're not. So forgive me because I sort of took that you were actually executing the transactions themselves.
We are. So we're using a DSP to buy inventory on the exchanges that comes from the publishers.
Okay. Yeah. And what do you see from a macro level? Like, where do you, in the next 24 months, how are you going to have to expand, grow? What does your offering look like to serve clients?
So a couple things. So display is actually fairly mature. It's a very significant, high volume business for VivaKi. Video is definitely number two and has ramped dramatically year over year. So 6-7x growth year over year. Mobile is something that we're currently building out. And then social is also kind of reaching quasi-maturity, I would say. And I think in the next 24 months, the key thing to do is actually connect the dots, right? So we've actually built some technology on top of all of our different channels that allows us to pull in data from each and kind of mash and mingle it and get smarter about how we plan each of those channels moving forward.
And what would the eGRP mean, a digital GRP mean to how you run your business today?
Yeah, so I think where a lot of people get hung up on GRP is that it's an age-gender metric, and I think if we start to redefine GRP as something else, which is basically what it is, reach times frequency, whether that's age, gender, or whether that's an Experian or Nielsen segment or Bezo or whoever it might be, I think it changes the conversation. And I think some of the folks in the television space even would be a little bit more, open to adopting to some of our ways of thinking. So, in the fact that it's an exposure metric, I think it's useful. But to your point before, you can't use that as a proxy for impact, right? So there's exposure, then equity, then engagement, then some kind of economic impact. It's simply an exposure metric. So I can use that and look across channels and say, if I'm launching a new product, where can I get the highest reach or the most efficient reach for this message? GRP is fine. I just think we need to expand it beyond age, gender to look at things like CIOs or people who purchased laundry detergent in the last 2 weeks or whatever it might be.
Right.